all, you have to decide, how is the decision going to be made? Because the people that you elicit feedback from are not necessarily the decision makers. So as an example, I just ran a process where everybody on the leadership team gave input, but everybody on the leadership team was not making the decision. So the discussion was among the leadership team, but then it went to a smaller group. Okay, so you have to decide, is this something that's like, it has to be unanimous consent? Like in an investment partnership, it might be, we do this if it's a majority saying yes. Could be one decision maker. So you have to decide that in advance. So that's separate and apart from the conversation. The reason why I say that is that people who are having the conversation need to understand that the goal of the conversation is not to make a decision in that conversation. It's not for everybody to agree and to actually make the decision right then. That's going to happen after what the goal of the conversation is, which is to inform. It's to inform the whole group and inform whoever is eventually going to be weighing in on that decision. Even if it's like, we're going to have the conversation, then people are going to vote, right? The goal of that conversation is not to decide, it's to inform the vote that's about to happen.
And you need to agree in advance on the decision policy, right? So that everybody knows the objectives of each stage of the decision process.
Exactly.
Right?
Okay, so now what do we do? All right, so let's take a situation where I've said, let's say we're just doing a simple hiring rubric. Let's make it really simple. And we have this question about mentorship, which I've mentioned before, and it's on a scale of 1 to 7, how strong of a mentor do you think that this person will make? All right, so everybody's filled that out along with you can imagine a hiring rubric, a whole bunch of other opinions that you've elicited, subjective judgments. And now we bring that together into a sheet, like it could be a Google sheet, where I can see, Brian, Mike, so on. We put this into a spreadsheet, and now I can see everybody's opinion. And for each question, I can see what number they gave. And now you can broadly do a couple things. One is you can say, here are the things that everybody has a lot of agreement on. This person's a very strong coder. Everybody's got 5, 6s, and 7s. So everybody pretty much agrees on that. But here are places where we seem to have a lot of dispersion. Okay, so this would be like, for example, I just ran like a remote work process, and like we saw this a lot. Like there was a question about being in person improves productivity. And it was a huge spread between 1 and 7 across people. So it tended to be clumped. Some people were sort of like 7. Yes, I really agree with that. It improved. And some people were like 2. It doesn't improve productivity. So here's how it would go. Let's take that question. So let's say Brian was a 2. Now you need very strong facilitation. And I would say, okay, here's all the places where everybody agrees and you acknowledge that. And now I'd say, Brian, can you just give your rationale for why you don't agree that being in person improves productivity? And Brian would then give his rationale with no interruptions from anybody else. And Brian's rationale would be, there's too much tapping on the shoulder and people are trying to work and they can't get any blocks of time because they're always being pulled into meetings and whatever. So he gives that reason. And then I say, Mike, you were sort of in the same zone. Why do you think do you have anything to add to what Brian said? And you may or may not. Does anybody not understand anything from what Brian said? And notice that framing, it's not, do you disagree? Is there something you didn't understand in there? Normally it's silent at that point because normally people pretty much understand. Then you say, Annie, you gave it a 7. You think it really improves productivity. Why do you think that? And then identify the people who are more on Annie's side and you explore that. And then you say, does anybody else have anything to add? And then you're done. There's no, okay, what do we think? Because the whole.
But it seems to me that when you've got a lot of dispersion in a category, it usually highlights that there's different people have defined that in very different ways, right?
It comes out in the rationale.
Okay.
That's exactly what comes out in the rationale. And sometimes what you'll find out is somebody will say, well, I was thinking about it not as if it's left unchecked. But the reason why I thought that it improves productivity is because I was thinking about managers managing that situation really well and keeping people separate. So you actually find out that there's agreement, right? It's because people are allowed to give their rationale. It's not like they have a rating and then there's nothing behind that. You're saying, why do you believe what you do? And then a good facilitator will reflect that back and it says, it seems to me that you're defining this differently if I understand. Can I ask you, Brian, I think you're defining it this way. Mike, I think you're defining it this way. Do I have that right? So all of this is coming out in the conversation. The key is I have no intention of Brian and Mike ever agreeing with each other because it's not the point. Why would you have a team if everybody ended up agreeing with each other? Who cares? So now we find that out. Everybody hears what everybody else has to say. And then how whatever the decision process is will happen. And maybe people vote now, right? Maybe there's one person who's making the decision, but now they've heard everybody's input. And you're exploring it in a way not meant to convince anybody of your point of view, which makes for a very bad discussion. But it's meant for me to be able to convey, why do I think the things that I do? And for me to hear you convey the same. And it's just about me understanding. So like if there's people are defining terms differently, that naturally comes out in that kind of conversation.